Can you believe it was more than 30 years ago that we inflicted the Fantastic Four on an unsuspecting human race? Now our heroes are still going strong. You may think you know the origin of the Fantastic Four, but until you see the far-out version we have waiting for you, you've only scratched the surface.
Stanley Martin Lieber is known as the brainchild of Marvel Comics, but when he entered Timely Comics, he was a gopher for the newly cemented million-dollar team of Captain America by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. In 1940, Simon and Kirby gave Timely Comics their first official hit.
And Captain America came from the need for a patriotic character because the times at that time were in a patriotic stir. The war was coming on. And the kind of cliche, the war clouds were gathering.
And after 10 issues of Captain America comics, they were at Timely's rival, National Comics.
Secretly, Jack and I decided that we would just make other arrangements instead of fighting with Martin Goodman over the royalties.
And Stan Lieber, who was going by Stan Lee soon after he joined Timely, was the head editor and doing well for himself. He had a stable of writers and artists and inventory to spare.
My prime concern was to please the publisher and the work I did so that I would have a steady job, and I was successful at that.
Then the entire comic industry would come under fire with the novel Seduction of the Innocent by Frederick Wortham. Soon Congress started holding hearings tearing down comics.
It's my opinion, without any reasonable doubt and without any reservation, that comic books are an important contributing factor in many cases of juvenile delinquency.
When this happened, Stan was a family man. He could now see his future was not in comics nor anywhere else. But where else would it be? Then his boss, Martin Goodman, gave Stan the task of letting his staff go. Too much inventory at Timely. It couldn't be long before Timely would close its doors. And what of Jack Kirby?
Mr. Jack Kirby.
After hit comics like Sandman, The Manhunter, books with young heroes, The Boy Commandos, and the Newsboy Legion, what was next? He co-created romance comics with Joe Simon. The team of Simon and Kirby would always be able to find a hit. But they took a hit in the 50s.
The Senate committee was trying to put an end to comics. The newspapers would show these big stacks of comics. The picture will always have a copy of one of our magazines on top. It was a big guilty.
Sales were down. Simon and Kirby's own company, Prize, would close its doors. Simon was a good enough businessman to find a home at Harvey Comics, and he would employ Jack Kirby as artist. Finding himself as a freelancer, Kirby loaned himself to other companies besides his work with Joe Simon, but not with Stan Lee and Atlas Comics, as it was renamed in the 50s. Kirby found a lane in the space race and science fiction. After early attempts with Joe Simon with the Three Rocketeers, Kirby would find success with his first newspaper strip, Sky Masters of the Space Force. Also, Kirby's return to DC was fruitful. He was a regular on DC's anthology titles, and he developed successful comics as in The Challengers of the Unknown and The Green Arrow. With his writing partners Dave and Dick Wood, he was doing well for himself in troubled times. Until he wasn't. Kirby had some help getting his news strip off the ground. Jack Schiff brokered the deal for Sky Masters of the Space Force, asking for a royalty. With the deal signed, Kirby realized the royalties would be paid from his rates. He pushed back on the original deal. Jack Schiff lessened his rate. After agreeing to the new deal, Kirby realized drawing a news strip was not as profitable as he would have imagined, or Sky Masters wasn't a monster hit. Kirby, feeling that the royalties to Schiff was similar to extortion, he quit paying the agreed amount. Kirby immediately found himself in court for non-payment, with no ground to stand on and seemingly no ability to defend himself. Kirby lost the suit, and with it, his work at DC.
Jack Schiff was a vengeful guy, evidently. If I ever met him, it was only in passing. But he didn't just think of this as a dispute outside the comics. He then used his power as a major editor at DC to basically get Jack Kirby banned from DC. Supposedly, Mike Sikowski, the Justice League artist, was one day sitting there, and somebody asked Sikowski, according to Mark, said that, listen, whoever won that lawsuit between Jack Kirby and Jack Schiff? And Sikowski looks up and says, Stan Lee.
Yeah.
Kirby, with nowhere else to go and his work with Joe Simon drying up, he had to try Stan Lee and Atlas Comics.
The fella here in my right isn't just Jack Kirby, he's Jolly Jack. Or
You get you for it.
or Jack King Kirby. And I'm Smiling Stan.
Prior to Kirby's return and most of the talent being let go, Stan lost his fastest artist and best friend, Joe Maneely, to a freak accident. Despite everything going wrong at Atlas, Martin Goodman had opened up production again. Stan would immediately put Kirby on the Yellow Claw, which lost its artist mentioned in the freak accident.
I had to make sales, and I had to come up with characters that were no longer stereotypes.
Stan also gave Kirby the book to write. Stan was also able to hire his brother Larry Lieber as scriptwriter.
I started writing those 6-page stories, mostly for Jack Kirby, I guess. I would type up a full script, and I gave him instructions, panel 1 this, panel 2 that. Jack didn't require many. I felt he could draw faster than I could write.
The company would turn around with the relaunch of The Rawhide Kid by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Not a big success, but Atlas had their lead creative team. Timely and Atlas did their best to follow every trend.
This was the case for 25 years, for 20 years before we started with the so-called Marvel Age of comics. In the past, if the war books were selling, we would put out war books and we'd sell our share. If the crime stories, cops and robbers type of things were selling, we'd put those out and we'd sell our share and so forth. After a while, I realized what I was doing was pretty meaningless, and I was doing the same thing over and over, year after year. And when we started Marvel Comics, I had been ready to quit. I figured, enough. I'm a grown man now. I shouldn't stay in the comic field any longer. And my wife said, before you quit, just for fun, you're going to leave anyway. Why don't you try doing some stories the way you think they should be done?
Once DC had a hit with the Justice League of America, Martin Goodman had Stan copy that success.
Stan and Jack put together the first issue of the Fantastic Four. And it had certain elements in it of the strip Jack had just done for DC called The Challengers of the Unknown. It had certain elements of the 40s Timely comics. They brought back the Human Torch. But it had a lot in it that nobody had done in comics before.
Now, the Justice League of America's plot was, a bunch of heroes get a signal about an alien invader. After a brief meeting in their headquarters, the team breaks up into groups of 2 to deal with the menace of Starro. And the Fantastic Four follows that basic plot. And what if Stan and Jack didn't just borrow from the Justice League or the Challengers? What if Marvel copied other books from DC for their Fantastic Four plot?
Remember Jules Verne's incredible story, Journey to the Center of the Earth? I've always loved it, and it was probably in the back of my mind when I wrote the Fantastic Four's first epic, The Menace of the Mole Man.
DC had a book called The Sea Devils, with a 4-person dynamic. There were 2 sea explorers, Dane and Biff, plus an unknown actress, Judy, and her kid brother in this group. Like Sue and Johnny.
Are you kidding?
Judy is the catalyst for the team's formation, despite her and her kid brother having no experience.
That's not funny.
And then there is Cave Carson Inside Earth, where buildings keep dropping down from their foundations like in the first interaction with the Mole Man. Cave and his crew find themselves in strange, wondrous lands beneath the earth, just like the Mole Man's underground caverns.
A trick that worked, I might add.
It doesn't stop there. Now Kirby has drawn many astronauts in their first attempt into space. Also, Stan's plot is still here for everyone to see. But the launch has some similarities to a Twilight Zone episode, Third from the Sun, where a family sneaks into a spaceship to escape their planet, with a lead actor who looks like an early Reed Richards.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Lastly, these books, The Fantastic Four, Challengers of the Unknown, The Sea Devils, Cave Carson, and others, take the lead from the novel or film The Lost Horizon, where a variety of characters discover the mythical utopian valley of Shangri-La in the Himalayas. And though Kirby has done something similar to this with the Challengers, the Fantastic Four characters in comics had personalities. Before the Fantastic Four, comic superheroes were just men of action. In the Challengers, even in the near death of their teammate Rocky, their female admirer June asked to replace that member. There's no sadness in his near loss, though the Challengers have already accepted they are living on borrowed time. Also, there is no bickering between the Challengers. The dialogue and characterization of the Fantastic Four was so advanced in the 60s, people are surprised that portions of the scripts are now dated.
I might add something that you may not be aware of. We don't do the stories the way most other outfits do. We kick around a plot very, very loosely and generally for a story. Just discuss it for a few minutes. We might say, Jack, I might say, Jack, in the next Thor, how about bringing back Galactus fighting the planet Ego or something? And Jack will say, great. And off he goes. I don't know where he goes, but off he goes. I don't see him for a week. He comes back a week later and the whole strip is drawn. And nobody knows what I'm going to see on those pages. He may have come up with a dozen new ideas, you see. It'll have something to do with Galactus and Ego. Then I take it and I write it on the basis of what Jack has drawn. He's broken it down to continuity form. In fact, he's drawn the whole thing, actually. I put in the dialogue and the captions. So he doesn't know exactly what I'm going to write, what words I'm going to put in their mouths. I don't know what he's going to draw. The whole thing is virtual chaos. But somehow when it gets together, it seems to hold together pretty well. We kind of like working this way.
Stan Lee would also make the omniscient narrator a voice similar to the novels he read in his childhood. A voice that would be seen as Stan Lee's own voice talking to the reader, or seemingly so.
Hi, heroes. Stan Lee here, inside the very spacecraft which changed the Fantastic Four. Hi, heroes. Stan Lee here in Atalan, the mysterious hidden land. Hi, heroes. Who'd have thought Stan Lee would get inside Galactus' secret antechamber? Oh, I love when this happens.
While crafting stories, Stan and Jack weren't locked into superheroes versus supervillains. Similar to the Challengers, the Fantastic Four's stories could be in any genre. Superhero, sci-fi, fantasy, westerns, gangsters, you name it. Then Stan and Jack added the romance genre elements to the multi-genre superhero storytelling. Though Reed and Ben were friends from college, they have a fight over Sue in their first issue. In their fourth issue, Sue fell for the Submariner while engaged to Reed. And for their most unexpected move, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby inverted the Beauty and the Beast dynamic, where Beauty loved the Beast, not the man he was. To some extent, it was taking the Frankenstein's monster dynamic with the blind man and turning it on its head.
Thank you, Floyd.
Now, fortunately, we seem to feel that we're creating the trends. And we figure that we don't have, as Jack said, we don't have to be that accurate because we think we can do better.
So I came up with a few on a galactic scale and soon reversed my direction.
For some reason, I went to the Bible. I came up with Galactus.
We realized after Galactus that we'd better take it a little bit easy with these villains, too. In fact, a lot of readers would write in and they'd say, well, where do you go from here? Who's he going to fight next after that?
And not only that, we felt it was disrespectful to Galactus to even destroy him in any manner.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
Trouble with Jack is he's too darned imaginative, and he gets himself absolutely trapped. The last thing he did and finally we both said we have to stop and retrench a little, is he had Thor fighting a whole planet. Jack came up with an idea, a fellow named Ego, who's a living planet in, what was he, instead of a universe?
Yes, he lived in a bioverse. And just not presenting the reader with a living planet, there had to be cause and effect.
He was acceptable due to the fact that Jack drew him so well, but the problem was, where did we go from there? After you fought a living planet, you can't fight a litterbug.
Try to keep everything as realistic as possible, even though it was just a superhero comic. Well, the book did wonderfully. It sold great.